Good morning. My name is Tedman Wong, Hearing Officer for San Francisco Public Works. Cerise Waiters is the clerk of this hearing. This hearing is being recorded via Zoom and will be available afterward through a link on the San Francisco Public Works website as at publicworks.org. As this is a virtual hearing, there's no sign-in sheet. If you would like to receive information about the results of this hearing, please send an email to the email address listed on the hearing notice. This public hearing is being held to consider 7 items. Order number 204360, 140 20th Avenue, to consider removal of one street tree with replacement adjacent to 140 20th Avenue. Order number 204361, Supervisor District 2, to consider the removal of 2 street trees within Supervisor District 2 at 2655 Broderick Street and 3126 Clay Street. Order number 204362, 1573 Vallejo Street, to consider the removal of 2 street trees with replacement adjacent to 1573 Vallejo Street. Order number 204363, 815 Buena Vista Avenue. This agenda item was rescheduled from the February 3rd hearing, and it's to consider the removal of 1 street tree with replacement adjacent to 815 Buena Vista Avenue. Order number 204364, 1453 McAllister Street, to consider the removal of 1 street tree with replacement adjacent to 1453 McAllister Street. Order number 204365, 1169 Market Street, to consider the removal of 13 street trees with replacement adjacent to 1169 Market Street. Order number 204366, 702 Forster Street, to consider removal of 1 street tree with replacement adjacent to 702 Forster Street. My job as hearing officer is to gather the facts for the hearing item, listen to your testimonies, and help our Director of Public Works make determinations. I will not be making any decisions today. Instead, I will forward the findings from this hearing and make my recommendations to the Director. The Director will make the final determinations. When the Director's determinations are made, the department will notify you of them if you have provided contact information. The hearing will proceed as follows for the 7 cases. Public Works staff will be asked to speak first and present their case, followed by property owner or appellant or applicant. Then members of the public will be allowed to speak. Then the department, if the department would like to address any comments, and finally the property owner, if the person has any rebuttals. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. The clerk will monitor the time for all speakers and will indicate when the speaker has 30 seconds left. If you are a party to this proceeding, you will be called on to speak. If you would like to use visual materials for your presentation, please let us know before you speak. Then you will have the standard 3 minutes to provide your comments. If you are a member of the public or witness who wants to speak, wait to be called on. Then use Zoom's, wait for the section for public comments, and then use the Zoom's raise your hand feature if you're on a computer to put yourself in the queue to speak. If you're dialing in on your phone, dial *9 to indicate you are raising your hand. When it is your turn to speak, you will be recognized. If on your phone and you're muted, press *6 to unmute yourself. If you would like to use visual materials in your presentation, please let us know before you speak. You will then have the standard 3 minutes to provide your comments. Comments and questions should be addressed to me, not to the department or the applicant. If you cannot finish your comments within the allotted time, you may submit written testimony to me by the end of this hearing. If I feel that a question is warranted, I will ask the question. After all comments are completed, I will close the item. We will now begin the hearing. First item is order number 204360, 140 20th Avenue.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see it? All good? Okay, great. Nice. So we'll start with, oh, sorry, I'm Madeline Farquhar. I'm with the Bureau of Urban Forestry. I'm an urban forestry inspector, and I will be just going over all the cases that are up for hearing today and just explaining Bureau of Urban Forestry side. So we'll start with 140 20th Avenue. Let's consider the removal of one street tree with replacement. This one's a fairly straightforward case. I was the one who actually dealt with this case. Came to it because there was a service request from the public about this tree, stating that it was in poor condition and they were hoping for a health inspection. So when I got here, it didn't appear to be, in terrible condition at first, but upon closer inspection, I found extensive decay in the trunk flare. You can see that the tree canopy is visibly declining. It doesn't always necessitate us initiating removal for that, but because the wood at the base of the tree was so extensively decayed, that is what kind of spurred me along to post it for removal. So here's a closer image of it. You can see it's pretty extensive. It's hard to tell from the picture on the right. It's not a trick of the light. You can actually see directly through the tree. So that's actually the road on the other side of that. So typically we try to measure, how much decay is in compared to like the diameter of the trunk, kind of a ratio of what we're comfortable with. And this is something that, we want to try to remove as soon as we can. So it was posted and it was protested by the public. And that's pretty much it for this case. Oh, my mistake. I actually did want to go over one last thing, which is that it is a replaceable site. And this is not the greatest photo, but we cannot replace it where it stands currently because it's just like smack in the middle of two driveways, unfortunately. So it's not a good spot for replacement, but there is a good location to the south of this tree or the south of its neighboring tree. It has the minimum 9 feet requirement from the street light, so we can get a small stature tree in this. And it is not a driveway. It looks like one right there, but that is not actually a legal driveway. And that's it.
You. Does anybody representing the property owner, appellant, or applicant wish to speak?
You may raise your hand if you're using the Zoom webinar. If you are calling in on the phone, you may use *9 to raise your hand. Okay, Mr. Wong, we have John Nolte. Oh, did you lower your hand? Did you want to speak, Mr. Nolte? Okay. Okay, we have Mr. Nolte. Go ahead, we should be able to hear you.
Thank you. I just have a statement to make. If this tree is it's planned to be removed, I'd wish that because I don't know if this is in the purview of DPW because they do the sidewalks. If you move the as shown in this current drawing, a diagram of the tree to moving it to the location. I'm wondering if you could also, when you drill the well for this, the question would be, can you also raise the curb to make it so cars are not running into the tree when they're backing up? Because if there's no curb there, as you made a point, this is not a legal driveway. Who's responsible for maintaining the curbs? Because you're responsible for the sidewalks. Is the curbs also under the preview of DPW to fix when they are not done correctly at this location as shown in this drawing? Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any others? I don't see any more raised hands, Mr. Wong.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public or witness who wish to speak? Okay, if there are no more comments for this item, I will now close the item and will make my recommendations to the director. The next item on the agenda is order number 204361, Supervisor District 2. May I have Public Works make its presentation?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll start with 2655 Broderick Street, proposed removal of one street tree with replacement. So this is just an overall photo of the tree. We came to this site on request from a private arborist working with the homeowner, just, explaining that there had been a recent branch failure as a part of those big storms we had back in January, I believe. So just wanted a health check. Arborist definitely made a recommendation for removal. And once I arrived and checked out the tree, I definitely agree. You can see the branch failure there right in the center of the tree. It's not the first one for this tree. I believe that there has been a more recent, even more recent branch failure, a smaller one up in the upper canopy. But there's a few defects with this tree. We've got girdling roots, or perhaps there was a brick wall here. That's what it kind of looks like. And unfortunately, whenever we have things like that around a tree, it can often literally choke out the tree. We call it girdling. It just means that, the trunk does not have a space to stretch out. The roots do not have space to grow, and it basically chokes the tree of nutrients and water. So that probably was one of the first issues with this tree. You can see it's decayed over time. There's a lot of missing bark all over the tree. Additionally, there are fruiting bodies, or mushrooms, as you call them. I believe it's maybe a species of Ganoderma, which once you start to see this kind of fungal body, it basically means that the fungus is pretty extensive in the entire tree. So it's been there for a while. It just hasn't shown, symptoms, basically. You can see some white rot along the trunk. So overall, this tree is just really losing its load-bearing qualities. It's structurally unsound, and for those reasons, we chose to approve it for removal. So that is 2655 Broderick Street, and I can answer any questions after the rest of the item. So I'll go on to 3126 Clay Street. Came to this tree again after a service request stating that a partial failure happened on this tree. This is a ficus. They are prone to failures if they have large codominant stems with included bark, and you can definitely see that from this tree. It's hard to see it as closely because there's ivy growing around the base of the tree, but I'll try to get a closer view. Here you can see the site of the failure. I couldn't get like a perfect picture of the included bark on this tree, but I can confirm that on both sides there was a codominant stem here, which means there are two stems of similar diameter, and they have a bad angle of attachment. So basically they're weakly attached. There's no sound wood actually holding them together. It's more so like bark that's stuck in the middle of their union. So that will oftentimes result in the tree just splitting apart in a way. So that's what happened to this tree. And unfortunately, the remaining stem still had some of that included bark. So it's a weakly attached stem. Basically, the remaining structure of the tree is unsustainable. So that is why we approved it for removal. Unfortunately, with this tree, it's in kind of a bad location. It's right next to a street light and fairly close to a water line and a gas line. So we cannot replace the tree in this particular location, but I know the public in the past has been interested in us looking around for nearby locations. Typically, we will replant if we have the ability to shift the basin. With this one, we might have to go a bit further. I did take a look, and even the neighboring properties do have some clearance issues for tree placement, but I think a bit further down, there could be a location for a replacement tree. So that is pretty much it for these two trees. Maybe mainly structural issues.
Thank you. Does the property owner, appellant or applicant wish to speak?
I see no hands at this time, Mr. Wong.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, I do. I'm sorry. There are two coming in. We have John Nolte and Joshua Clip. Just a moment. Go ahead, Mr. Nolte.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, on the first one, I see that there's some issues, as was stated with it, but the main issue that I see here is that I would like a mature statue tree for that location in replacement. And then also for the Clay Street site, I don't understand why you allow the ivy to grow on it. I would assume that that would take away from the helping the tree grow, and that probably sucked out a lot of the water or whatever in the immediate area. So that harmed that tree by not removing the ivy going up the tree. And then also, hopefully, we could have a replacement for the 3126 Clay Street nearby with the a medium-sized tree replacement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolte. And we have Joshua Clip. Go ahead, Mr. Clip.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Sorry, yeah, I would have raised my hand sooner, but I thought we were waiting for the applicant. I wasn't sure if they were here.
Yeah, they hadn't raised their hand. You're fine. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so I second Mr. Nolte's statement around making sure that we're putting in the largest possible statured tree given the constraints of an area. And I guess I wasn't clear from Madeline's presentation if there are replacements being proposed for both, or if it was just for the first one. The agenda says the first is with, and that the second is without. I know I've said it before, but I guess I'll just restate, because it's a new public hearing, that there's really never a reason for a tree not being replaced. And I know that Public Works, they've got its lanes and its considerations. And I want to, again, just encourage all of our departments to stop thinking inside our lanes that are so narrow that we fail to meet not only the goals of our urban forest plan, but also the goals of our city's own climate action strategy. And I want to just point out that the urban forest plan and the climate action strategy don't operate on a department by department level, but these are operating at citywide systemic levels. And so our departments, if we're going to meet those, need to operate systemically as well. And to that, I would point out that the removals here are being presented at a district level. So I would respectfully suggest that replacements can also be considered at a district level. I know the department is well aware there are plenty of empty tree wells in District 2, and would also just point out that I attended, back when we could attend things in person, a Board of Supervisors committee meeting. I believe it was the Neighborhood Safety and Planning or something, NSPS or whatever that stands for, PSNS, where Supervisor Stephanie, who is the supervisor for District 2, was begging Public Works to plant more trees in her district. So trees can always be replaced. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clip. And we have someone named Michael. Michael, are you the applicant or attendee? You should be able to speak now.
I'm a member of the public. I just want to point out that the second tree needs to be replaced within District 2. I want to correct maybe the agenda, or at least ask Buff to consider that when after they remove the tree. It's important that we have as many trees as possible on our streets. We don't need to be losing them. We don't have that many to begin with. So please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Wong, I do not see any more hands at this time.
Thank you. Would the department like to address any comments?
Sure. Yeah. Let me check my notes real quick. We'll definitely look into a replacement nearby on the 3100 block of Clay Street, because I do believe there are some further down, just not like right in the immediate area. Let's see. I think that was all I wanted to say. We are replant. We have a planting contract coming up soon, but I'm not sure if there's any empty basins included in District 2 area. But it's interesting, the idea of having replacements be on a district wide scale as opposed to like one tree, one replacement per address.
Thank you. If there are no more comments for this item, I will now close the item and will make my recommendations to the director. The next order is order number 204-362-1573 Vallejo Street. Would the department please make the presentation?
Yes, thank you. This is the proposal to remove 2 street trees with replacement adjacent to the address 1573 Vallejo Street. It's tree number 2 and 3 along this row of 4 street trees. These were just proposed for removal recently because they are severely declining. So they're 2 Photinia, that they call them Chinese Photinia. They're fairly short-lived species, fairly small species. We kind of see this sort of condition in a lot of them around the city. It's unclear whether they're all planted kind of around the same time. Sometimes our species kind of go in those cycles. But we do not plant them as much anymore because of the reasons I stated. They're just fairly short-lived. So this is an evergreen tree. It should be full of leaves all year round. There's no dormant period, but you can see it's in decline, nearly half dead and just fairly unhealthy. Same with this tree. It's probably in maybe a little bit worse shape. More than half dead, most likely. So just small unhealthy trees we're hoping to remove and replace. And there's not a whole lot of other details beyond that. And that is it for this case.
Would the property owner, appellant, or applicant wish to speak? If not, if there are any members of the public or witnesses who would wish to speak.
We have Mr. Nolte. Go ahead, Mr. Nolte.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I see that there are no power lines and it doesn't look like there's there might be, I can't tell from the sidewalks if there's any issues with the sewer lines, et cetera. But since there's no power lines and because the light pole is far away, I would have liked to see a tree that, like you're making a point that this is an evergreen, and so it has leaves year round. I would like to see the replacements of the two trees be similar, because you usually try to keep the species the same, and also make it into the trees would be, replacement trees would be larger in stature, and also because you have room there, nothing to abate, no issues with what's currently there. And lastly, to have that tree be something that has more for the shade, because I think and that would be more conducive to the area, because I consider it more shade in the city is better than no shade, and also it also helps because those trees are usually better for the environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nolte. And we have Mr. Clip. Go ahead, Mr. Clip.
Thanks, Therese. I'll second John's comment about putting in larger stature trees on the side of the public rights of way where they can grow without having that overhead interference. I think maybe one of the reasons that we have smaller stature trees in these sort of prime spots is because in the past it's been up to the homeowners who have been responsible for their maintenance. And so they want smaller stature trees because it's just cheaper and easier to maintain. And also because, it goes through Friends of the Urban Forest, and kind of the same thing, they have to kind of defer. In the past, they've had to defer to the homeowner's preference because the homeowner had to take on that responsibility. That's not the case anymore. After Prop E, now the street trees are the responsibility of the city. And so I think, whenever we've got prime spots like this, where you've got a wide sidewalk and no overhead interference, we got to do what we can do to maximize ecosystem benefits and carbon sequestration. And certainly these tiny little trees are not it. So for those reasons, I would just second what John said.
Thank you, Mr. Clip. And we have Michael. Go ahead, Michael.
This is Michael from the public. I would like to see on the smaller picture, you have across the street a healthy green tree. To me, that's the kind of tree I'd like to see there, something that's will obviously take to the neighborhood and would give more shade and would obviously have leaves all year round. I don't know what kind of tree it is, but these ones that basically you can see through them all the time, they're not providing any shade. They're not providing the carbon that's needed for the community, especially now that we've had many bad days of air ongoing. And so I like to, consider these things when we're putting in new trees. We need to have functional air quality for us humans. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Mr. Wong, I do not see any other hands.
Okay, thank you. Does the department wish to address any of those comments?
No, I am okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There are no more comments for this item. I will now close the item, and I will make my recommendations to the owner, or to the director, sorry. Moving on to the next agenda item. Order number 204-363, 815 Buena Vista Street, or Buena Vista Avenue. May I have the department make the presentation?
Yes, thank you. So this is proposed removal of one street tree with replacement. I originally came to this tree because we were doing a key map inspection, which is when we go through um, every tree in a smaller section of the city in order to prepare it for regular scheduled maintenance. So we go through, we try to identify the hazardous trees, the trees that are declining. We try to get them into the contract so that we can do it as efficiently as possible. And this was one of the trees. It's another blackwood acacia, the same type of species as 2655 Broderick Street, where we saw the girdling roots and the missing bark and all that. There are some similar issues with this tree. You can see it's quite decayed in the trunk. It's got a lot of missing bark, which just shows that the decay has been going on for some time. We've got some major decay in major branch unions, so that we would consider, just a little bit. We want to get the tree removed sooner rather than later. So you can see these right here. You can see in the upper canopy, we also have some missing bark. So it's really quite extensive throughout the entire tree. We can see an old, probably a branch failure on the left. And what's interesting about that is that usually when trees either have a pruning cut or have a branch failure, you want to see what we call good response wood. So you kind of see these like lips of bark that start to grow over the wound to try and seal it up. But you see nothing here on this tree, which is a pretty clear sign of low vigor in the tree and just an indicator of unhealthy tree. And go back to the very beginning and show that there is some decline in the canopy as well. And when this species starts to decline way up in the upper canopy, it's usually an indicator of rooting issues. So for those reasons, we decided to post the tree for removal. It is replaceable, although it's close to some little small shrubs. It's got enough clearance for sure to be a viable replacement site. And because there's no high voltage or anything like that, we could definitely replace it with another very large stature species like a blackwood acacia, but not that species. And that's it.
Thank you. Does the property owner, appellant, or applicant wish to speak?
This was a buff initiated removal, so there's no applicant.
Okay, thank you. Does any member of the public wish to speak?
Yes, we have Mr. Clip. Go ahead, Mr. Clip.
Thanks. Yeah, just my same comment about large statured species. Obviously, this one managed to make it, and that is a massive sidewalk. Gosh, that looks like it's over 20 feet deep. So really, please, big tree there, please. That's all.
Thank you. And we have Mr. Nolte. Go ahead, Mr. Nolte.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. There's a couple of issues I see here. One, I believe to the to my right, there is a light pole there, and that might affect the large statue tree to be put in. And then between the light pole and the tree, you have two smaller trees right next to it. So I have a question about those two trees and how big those will grow. And then you go further to the left of the current tree, you also see where a tree was taken out, because you see the square where the cement was. So my question now is that because this is the largest tree in this picture, replacing and then competing with those two trees that are already there, and then also the light pole, and then also the other issue would be the why can't we open up the basin to the left and put another tree in because we're removing a big massive tree here, and why can't we plant two trees at this site, one for the replacement of the removal and then one to where there was one before. So that's my observation for this site. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolte. And we have Michael. Go ahead, Michael.
I sort of agree with what Mr. Nolte said, but I would like to see the replacement put in the square that's not been used yet on the sidewalk, because it would seem that there would be more way for the tree to spread out. That's a large stature, and then put a medium-sized one in the replacement of where this tree has failed, because you have two competing trees already planted, so that at least all the spaces are used properly, and will hopefully all prosper after everything is done. I don't, I want to make sure trees actually survive, and it looks like there's needs to be some work on the corners of the sidewalk curb, because I hate to see a car jump over to the any of the trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I don't see any more hands, Mr. Wong.
Okay, thank you. Does the department wish to address any of the comments?
Yeah, I just want to confirm the clearance issues. It should be all good. These small trees next to this larger blackwood acacia, they've been repeatedly topped over and over again. They're not really viable species, or not really viable street trees. I do not believe they will ever grow to their full potential. There's a lot of these small little shrubby trees, I guess you would call them, along this stretch. There's quite, along this whole property, there's sidewalk opened almost on the entire curb. So there's a lot of locations where there were street trees at one point. There's some of these shrubs, but in this particular location, we can definitely replace with a large stature tree. The location is at least 15 feet away from the light pole. It doesn't look, you might not be able to tell that from this, but I can confirm that. On the other side, where you can see the small open space, I'll review that again, but I want to say that the trees on the property side, you can kind of on the left see part of the canopy. They're extending quite a lot over the sidewalk, so it might just not be a good location to plant maybe another large stature tree. Maybe a small stature would work. We don't want to interfere with the really healthy property side trees there. So just wanted to confirm we can definitely plant a large stature species here.
Okay, thank you. There are no more comments for this item. I will now close the item and will make my recommendations to the director. Moving on to the next agenda item, item number 5, order number 204364, 1453 McAllister Street. May I have the department make its presentation?
Yes, so this was a removal permit submitted by the property owner for proposed removal of one street tree with replacement. They are committing to replacing and watering the tree, and we have approved the removal. So when I first visited this site, I did go back and forth about possibly retaining the tree. It is a Victorian box tree. Occasionally, they will bounce back when they look like this, but it's rare. Oftentimes we will wait until the tree fully dies to remove it, because we obviously don't want to make a hasty decision. However, because the property owner is willing to remove and replace and maintain the tree, that affected my decision, as well as the condition of this tree compared to the other trees on the block of the exact same species. So it's surrounded by the same species, Victorian box, and you can see this is slightly old, so the middle tree looks a little bit better than the most recent picture, but you can see how much more vigorous and full the trees on the block are. This is what a healthy Victorian box tree should look like. We have noticed a lot of them declining in the city. So there is a disease called Victorian box decline. It's not definitive exactly what causes it, but they haven't handled the cyclical droughts super well. This one, unfortunately, has just declined a lot. It might just have been outcompeted by its neighbors, but because of its decline and the fact that the property owner really wants to replace the tree and maintain it, we approved it for removal. And that is it for this case.
Okay, thank you. Is the property owner, appellant, or applicant, do they wish to speak?
We have no hands, Mr. Wong.
Okay, if not, then we'll move on to any member of the public who wishes to speak regarding this agenda item.
Yes, we have Mr. John Nolte. Go ahead, Mr. Nolte.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Couple of issues here. I noticed to the right of this tree, there is a possible driveway. And so my issue would be that this tree well is quite clear next to, if that's the driveway for either the current building or the building next door, I'm not sure, but I just see it when you saw a picture of the other Brisbane boxes on the street, that there was a driveway there. So my question is that this might want to be moved maybe further, but I do see some utility issues. But the next question is, because the problem with Brisbane boxes is they lean, and we put in one neighborhood, you put in over 100 of them, and the problem was that the DBW by 10 years, half of them were gone. So I do question, questioning that, and they're not as bigger as these, even though we're a couple miles away. So obviously there's less wind at this location and so forth. So I would, I guess, do another Brisbane box, but I would also want to make sure it doesn't lean either which way, so it's secure. So I would, because be in contact with this property owner since they want to water it. I would also want to make sure that they would make sure it grows straight and put in those planting poles, make sure, and I would like it to be secure because this is in Hayes Valley or nearby, and I think that these this needs surrounding part of the planting security of the tree when it's planted, and a water and maybe a water bag too. Okay, those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Nolte. And we have Mr. Clip. Go ahead, Mr. Clip.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So I want to express gratitude to Madeline for explaining her thought process and all of this. I think what's kind of unfortunate is that city budget ever has to play a factor in any of this consideration. And I understand that at this moment, because of where we are with the pandemic and other factors, primarily the pandemic, tree planting money for the city is basically nothing. And the department is increasingly forced to rely upon developers, private homeowners, and nonprofit partners and their grant money to get any kind of tree planted along a public right of way. So I know that the department is asking the city for more budget for tree planting and establishment funds, and I really, really hope this happens so that budget is never a factor in a removal decision, only the health of the tree. Speaking of the health of the tree, it is interesting that the two trees adjacent to this one are healthier, and so I'm curious if Madeline has any perspective on how that happened and how that could be avoided with the replacement tree, if there's any type of species that would do better or maintenance techniques or things so that we don't end up back here in 7 to 10 years with a similar problem on the replacement. And then since it will likely be the property owner who is managing the removal and replacement and care, if there's been any discussion on species and timing of that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clip. I do not see any other hands, Mr. Wong.
Thank you. Does the department wish to address any of those comments?
Yeah, sure. We have not discussed species yet, so that is something that I would follow up with once the tree, if it is approved for removal. So, but I am in close contact with the property owner. Victorian box is typically a good choice for like the south side of a street where it might not get as much light. I know Mr. Nolte was talking about trees leaning, and that's usually not a species problem. It's usually a site problem where trees will lean towards the light if they're in a quite shady location. So they'll kind of lean out into the street to try and get more of the more sunlight during the day. So I think, but I wouldn't choose Victorian box again, probably because of the reasons I think it did decline and the reasoning behind Victorian box decline that I think makes the most sense, which is root disturbance. Some of them handle it fine, others just decline, 5 to 10 years after there's any sort of root disturbance. It's hard to determine when, these sidewalks were repaired. Sidewalks get repaired a lot around the city by the property owner and city agencies. So I can look in the record to see if there's anything to that. If we have any records on sidewalk repair, that's my educated guess as to why this tree declined. It's also next to a pretty large tree, and that coupled with it being on the south side of the street, it might not have received enough light and enough energy to battle any sort of issues that happened from root disturbance in the past. So I think just maybe a less vigorous specimen, pretty much. But yeah, I'll definitely work with the property owner if it is approved to find the right species that can handle more shady locations. That's a very big factor.
Okay, thank you. There are no more comments for this item. I will now close the item and will make my recommendations to the director. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, item 6, order number 204-365-1169 Market Street. May I have the department make their presentation?
Yes. This is to consider the removal of 13 street trees with replacement adjacent to 1169 Market Street. It was a removal permit submitted by the construction company. The staff approved removal of 7 of the trees, and the public has protested, and we denied the request to remove 6 of the trees, and the applicant appealed. So it's a partial denial. That's usually what we call it if we don't approve all the trees. Oh, hang on just one second. So this site originally came to us back in 2016. There was an original removal permit back before the whole construction started, and it was denied based on tree health. So the trees were protected during construction, and as of let's see, it looks like the project has been working with Better Market Street project for quite some time. I believe the budget for that project has changed a little bit, so there's not as many improvements coming to Market Street because of that. But this removal application came to us. The new one came in 2020, and after they had consulted with an arborist on the health of the trees, we do have a good handful of issues with the Platanus on Market Street, just based on there's a pretty big wind tunnel effect that goes down Market Street. So it is tough for a lot of different tree species there. Some of the Platanus are doing well. Others just have succumbed to that constant wind force. It really dries out trees. It desiccates their leaves. It makes it hard for them to really, reach their full potential on that street. So this particular block did have some declining trees, and after inspecting them for a second time and consulting the removal application that included the arborist report, we did approve 7 trees. And let me just make sure that I have that number correct. Yes, we approved 7 trees for removal and we denied 6 of them based on health again. So this is the site plan, and you can see up to the very top, that's the location of the trees adjacent to the building. And I'm just going to run through each tree, and then I do believe that the arborist is here, and perhaps maybe somebody else from the construction crew to just talk on the overall project. So this is a diagram from the urban arborist and shows their tree assessment. Looks like, you know, some of the trees are doing well, they're healthy, they're fairly vigorous for a Platanus on Market Street. And then others have succumbed and are either dead or declining. So you can kind of see based on, you know, location, what they came to decide. And so there's another viewing of the site plan, and this is kind of turned upside down, if that makes any sense. So we'll just run through the trees quickly. Tree 1, considered healthy and sustainable. So we've denied the removal of this tree. Didn't see any major defects. Doing quite well for a Platanus on Market Street. And similar for most of the trees that we denied. It was just based on the fact that we do believe that they're sustainable, they're fairly healthy, we think they have a chance of survival in the wind tunnel. And you know, their canopies are looking fairly nice, no major trunk wounds. That's the typical reasoning behind the denials of some of these trees. Similar explanation, tree number 3. Tree number 4, similar explanation, fairly healthy canopy, no major trunk wounds. Tree number 5, similar, has some structural issues, but overall, no major trunk wounds. And tree number 6 was approved for removal. I believe there are some issues with the trunk on some of these trees that we denied. I've got only a couple pictures for each, or sorry, approved. Back to another denial, tree number 7, looking healthy. These photos were taken right as the trees were going dormant. So that can be kind of confusing for somebody who's not familiar with the species. They're not dead, they have gone dormant. They're a deciduous tree. Again, this one was approved. Some trunk wounds on this tree, as well as declining canopy. Some of the dead wood has been removed out of this tree. Same for this tree. I believe this is probably the worst condition of all the trees. There's quite a lot of missing bark. This one has fully died. I think it might be the only one in the line of trees that has fully succumbed and is dead. So this one's pretty close. So yeah, again, deadwood has been pruned out a little bit, but you can see missing bark in the upper canopy. This is really not a good sign. Shows very low vigor, inability to seal any wounds. And similar situation, trunk wounds, low vigor. And similar with this, tree 12, just a severe declining canopy, and some of this deadwood has been pruned out already. Same with tree 13, low vigor, not doing so well, and this one we've approved. So I'll go back. To the site plan, and that is it for us. There is a one-to-one replacement proposed for this project. Similar species, although we're trying to choose platanus that have a much better disease resistance and are a lot more vigorous than the current variety. So that is what Better Market Street, I believe, has proposed. But I do believe that the private arborist also has suggestions on better species choice.
Okay, thank you. Does the property owner, appellant, or applicant wish to speak?
We have Mr. Steve Ronzone or Ronzoni. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. Are you able to speak now?
Yes, I'm present. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'd like to share my screen. Can
Okay,
you allow me to do that?
yes, just one moment. Okay, you should be able to share your screen now. You will just need to unmute yourself as well.
Okay, and just push the share screen
Yes,
button. Okay.
yes.
Okay, what I would like to do is give you a short presentation of our project. I'm the owner's representative for the developer, and it's actually the developer that's made this application, not the construction team.
Okay, I'm sorry, let me interrupt you. Did you already press the share screen button because we're not seeing your screen yet?
I did.
Okay, so click the share screen button and then click the item again that you want to share. There you are. Okay, now we can see it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think that this application should be made within the context of the full project. This is a $1 billion project. It's called Trinity Place. We have completed 3 buildings, which I'm showing to you here. And what we're really dealing with right now is phase 4, which is on Market and 8th Street. This is 1,900 apartments. It's one of the few projects in the city that has a development agreement with the city, which obligates the city to work with us on a number of items. And this would be one of those items that we'd like to work with. Now, what I'd like to do here is I'm just going to show you briefly how committed we have been to the environment and bringing and what we've dealt with trees previously and how we approach this, and then what we'd like to do with Market Street. So this next slide here, this is just a view of what phase 4 is, and the trees in question here are in front. This will be complete and ready for move-in in early July. As you can see, it's a very, very, very significant project, and the details for the architecture were worked out in very close coordination with city planning and our supervisor at the time. We want this facade to be as presentable as possible, and it's very important to us that occur. The next slide here, this shows you, this is an interior public-private park. It's our private land, but it's open to the public during normal business hours. And I just wanted to show you what we've done in here inside in our commitment to planting and urban environment, to create not only a great environment for the city, but to also, do our contributions to environmental issues and so forth. This is looking down into the interior plaza. I'm going to walk you around it briefly. Here's another view down, and you can see we've put in a significant amount of large size trees right from the very start. These are just ground views. These are deciduous here. I forget the species, but they green out very, very nicely. But you can see the quantity of planting that we've done. And we brought the trees in at this size. So this is just a view within. And again, this is a public environment open to the public. This is the courtyard in the new building that we're doing right now. This is 8th Street out here beyond. Market Street is to the right. So you can see what we've done there. We're very, very committed to great environments that contribute to the overall environmental health of the city. Now,
30 seconds remaining.
This is a view down Mission Street. On Mission Street, you allowed us to remove and replace all of the trees with your designated tree. This is a view down 8th Street. Same thing on 8th Street. You allowed us to remove and replace all trees, your designated tree. And here's what we have on Market Street, which is just totally unacceptable to us. These are going to die, even the ones that we replace. We're going to have a mixed message here. We're going to have a new tree and an old tree. The last thing I would add, because I know I'm out of time, we will take the trees down, we will remove them, we will handle the replacement, and we will maintain them. So this is a no-cost option or opportunity for the city of San Francisco to greatly improve what everybody acknowledges is the wrong tree that's been placed on Market Street.
Thank you, Mr. Ronzon.
Now, how do I get out?
Oh, just one moment and I will fix it for you.
Or should we just leave it up for now?
No, I will fix it back to the attendee. And
Okay.
this, what you've presented, you have already submitted that to our, we will make sure that the hearing officer is able to see that as well, because you submitted that to our urban forestry, correct? Oh, there he is. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Mr. Ronzon, are you able to hear me? You can unmute.
Yes, I can hear
Okay,
you.
okay, I'm sorry. I had moved you over while I was in the middle of speaking. Your presentation has already been submitted to us, correct?
That presentation that I just went through has not. I just put it through. What you've been presented with so far is our arborist report. But I'd
Okay.
be happy to send this in to the individual we've been working with, Brian Ong, if you would like me to.
That will be fine. Yes, you send it to him and then we'll have it forwarded to the hearing officer.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We also have Mr. Scott Wheeler. Mr. Wheeler, you should be able to speak.
Great. Hello. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thanks so much for bringing me into this. I just wanted to extend a courtesy to everybody in the public who's participated as well. I think we're all here to increase and enhance our urban canopy. Briefly about myself, I'm a born and raised San Francisco native. I've been working in trees in the city since 2001 professionally. I'm also an ISA board certified master arborist and a consulting arborist. I do inspections and consultations for trees for myself. I was brought into this project as a consulting arborist with the urban arborist, and I submitted the report that Mr. Ronzoni had referenced and that you referenced as well earlier. So for me, this is a really exciting opportunity to kind of get outside the lines that Mr. Klipp mentioned earlier, the sort of confines that urban forestry has created in order to preserve and maintain the existing trees within the city. I don't see this as something typical where we're looking at trees in poor health or form that, you know, are presenting a hazard to the public, but rather a large number of trees in this particular area, this grove of 13, have either died or are dying, the rest of which are in poor form. I don't expect them to do well in the future. And we have the unique opportunity here to have someone step in to cover the costs of removing and replacing these trees with more appropriate trees for the location and to maintain those trees into the future. It's a fantastic opportunity. I hope the city will look at that as something more than just our typical tree replacement policy that we kind of run their rules and regulations by. For me, the idea of replacing all the trees at one go is better for the long-term health and sustainability of the new trees rather than replacing half of them now and then phasing out individual trees through the future. Beyond the aesthetics, there's also the health of the trees as they're growing up together in a grove. We're going to have a chance for their uniform development, care, and maintenance. And regardless of species, all trees hate sudden change. So if you have some trees that are growing up in the shadow of larger, more established trees, suddenly those trees are removed. Now those younger trees are exposed to sunlight levels or wind forces that they haven't experienced before, and they're possibly not adapted to. And that could affect their structure, their health, or their form, or their safety. I'd also like to address just diversifying the urban canopy in that area. I think when they were planted, the London plane trees were probably the best selection at that time. And that would probably be, I'm guessing, the 70s or maybe the 80s. And we've discovered a lot of new species of trees that we've either hybridized or experimented with in other cities and found them to be as or more successful. If you look down that corridor of Market Street, there's really not a lot of visual interest or appeal with the existing trees, and they're almost all the same type, except around the Montgomery BART station, where the city put in a beautiful type of an ash tree. And then also, if you go down off Market off 10th, they've lined 10th Street with a type of ash tree. I'd recommend that as one of the replacement trees. There's also the Frontier Elm, which would do wonderfully in that location. It's very hardy and resistant to wind, but we can go into species selection with the city later. I just think it's a brilliant opportunity for us to get involved here and start to replace an entire little grove of trees as one, rather than picking and choosing piecemeal, and hoping that the trees adapt well as they grow up under the shadow of larger, more established trees. I'd like to compare it, if we look at what we're doing with the buildings in our city and how they have to be constantly renovated, rebuilt, redesigned as our own safety standards improve. Why aren't we doing the same with the trees that line the streets? That's all I have for now.
Oh, we might have lost Tedman.
No, I'm still here.
Oh,
I
you're
think-
here. Okay. Sorry. Oh, there you go. Maybe we lost Cerise. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it was Cerise.
There it is. Yes, she texted me and said she lost connection, so I'm sure she's trying to get back on.
Can you guys hear me still?
Yes.
Take the opportunity, since we have a little extra time. For me, this is a bigger picture item that we're talking about here. And overall, I think that it's something I'd like to go into more detail, maybe with Chris and Carla and you guys at Urban Forestry, about this sort of outdated and well-meaning, but ultimately misguided policy of tree replacement and protection. To me, it's in 20 years of doing this in the city, I could see how it's been designed to protect trees, but what it actually does is limit our ability to enhance and improve the urban canopy as a whole. And we all want the right trees in the right places. It's location, location, location. And I think it should be a little easier for us to remove and replace problematic or ill-suited species for individual locations. And I like the idea of doing it by district. I also like the idea of protests having to be accompanied with a fee. It's $300 for a member of the public to protest a tree removal in Pacifica. And that's not very far from San Francisco. And I think that funding could be used to help expand tree planting sites and tree plantings go into urban forestry. That's something that we can bring up at a later date, but I wanted to mention that now. And thank you all for your time.
Okay, it looks like we have a couple hands up. Has Josh gone? No, go ahead, Josh.
Thanks. To the last speaker, just, a little awareness of how many people without means would like to be part of the public process. Okay, so I'm a fan of biodiversity. That said, any sycamore that's managed to establish in the wind tunnel that is Market Street is one tough tree that really needs to be preserved and protected, especially given our city's diminished commitment to planting trees in conjunction with all of what it has deemed to be these improvement projects with diminishing budgets, and especially considering that this neighborhood is one of the least canopied neighborhoods in the city. I'd also point out that any plan that thinks trees are going to be successful attempting to grow in a space surrounded by 17 stories to the east, west, and south might respectfully rethink that proposal. I'm trying to remember when the trees on 8th Street were approved for removal. Maybe Madeline has that information. But what I'd like to know is if the trees that we're discussing today are still standing. I drove past the site the other day while returning from the dentist, unfortunately, and noticed that the site construction seemed to be built all the way out to the street. So again, this was just in passing. I didn't stop and take a close look, but it looked like the trees that we're talking about today would already be inside the footprint of the construction area. So I'd like to know, I'd like the applicant to confirm on the record that it is not yet actually removed any of the trees at issue here, that those trees are actually receiving protection while construction is ongoing, and that they're still there prior to actually receiving a permit to perform any work on those trees. And I would also ask if Buff would revisit the site prior to issuing any decision to confirm that to be the case. And finally, just to point out, you can't replace a tree the same way you replace a building. Those two policies, they don't compare. And replacements are not a generosity by the developer, that's a code requirement. So my question is, what analysis has been done to determine whether 1-to-1 is even the correct ratio here versus an evaluation according to the code requirements? And in the spirit of the previous testimony about thinking outside the box, whether the applicant has considered any alternative planting configurations to maximize tree planting, such as, say, staggering tree basins or tree wells across those massive sidewalks along Market Street. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Josh. I believe Mr. Nolte is up now, and let me go ahead. Sorry, who had their hand up?
I think it was John Nolte
Okay,
and Michael.
Okay. I'm not seeing, there he is. There you go, John, sorry. The girl, Mr. Nolte.
You might have to, I can't remember if you have to promote folks to panelists to speak. That's probably not right. Let's see. Oh yeah, maybe.
Hi.
No,
Okay.
there he goes. There he goes.
Oh, no.
Great. You fixed the menu here. Hi, this is John Nolte. A couple of issues here. One, when this building, when those trees were planted next to it, that was a parking lot. So therefore it had plenty of light going back, and that was a restaurant in that front of that area. So it had plenty of light before this construction of the whole block was done for Trinity Plaza. I would also look into the, because we've had problems in the past with the dealings with large projects, the development agreement, and what that says, because unfortunately we've had sometimes that supersedes what's being done here. We've had that problem before with the hearing. The next issues would be this is phase 4. So this is the last phase. This is the Market Street, which is really our main street. So I would be really concerned about that because the Better Street Plan has sort of died because of lack of funding. And so luckily the developer wants to, because it's $1 billion project, wants to put these trees in. But I would be concerned also because this is also an entrance and exit to BART. There would be a couple of issues, how the trees would go in, and also the roots. Then the next issue is since this is phase 4, some of the pictures were very deceiving. There was in the presentation. I already know because I've actually looked at this property and been dealing with it for over 10 years, is that the issue is, a couple of issues is each of the 4 phases are locked. So therefore you don't have, except what he showed me was this open space, but I don't even know if it's actually open to the public. And I know that the other locations, the other 4 phases, they are sealed off from each other, so you can't go from one property to the next. And so what they've done on Market, I also noticed that on 8th Street, that they were all vaults on that side, and we're losing all that tree planting, and the trees that were there are not going to obviously go back because of all those vaults that I saw on 8th Street, and that's part of this property that we're discussing now. And so I would like to add more trees for the trees we lost on 8th Street at the side of this property because of how it was built and where they decided to put the vaults. The next issue would be I just find it very concerning that how this back and forth thing went with the city on this project, and I hope that the borough takes the lead and also deals with the developer on how it destroyed the trees on Market Street during the development of phase 4. Thank you very much. With no tree protection.
Okay, and next we have Michael.
Yes, my name is Michael Nolte, and I'm the Executive Director of Alliance for a Better District 6. And we've been following this project for at least over 10 years. And, this seems like to be a legacy project of Angelo Sangiacomo. And of course, it's, he's passed away this year or last year or recently anyway. But we'd like to see as many healthy trees put to stay, but they look like the majority of them have been hacked by, I don't know who did it. It was the city or the owner of the property. And if it was the owner of the property, it kind of shows how they care for their trees, which I find kind of disturbing. But at the same time, I do agree with the arborist that there needs to be some continuity with the trees. But I like to see larger stature trees be placed on Market Street because it is our Main Street corridor. If the owner is going, the owner of the property is going to maintain and put in trees, there should be as many as possible. To again, like I said, do good for in memory of the Angelo Sangiacomo, whose this stream was built for. I just think that the project, I'm glad to see the project is nearing an end in July because it's been a long time. I'm sorry that some of the amenities that were there at the beginning are no longer there, such as the restaurant that's been now in Daly City, the Moon Star. But, I think I'd like to see that the project move forward and conclude as soon as possible. So again, I'd like to see as many trees as possible put in the sidewalk. And if the if the project sponsor wants to help out District 6, they could also put some trees in the surrounding area, because we, again, are not have as many trees in the neighborhood and within District 6 as we need. And we, we have many of our highways are in our area. Thank you.
Okay, we have another hand up. Did Scott already speak? I'm sorry, I'm kind of filling in as backup clerk. We had some technical difficulties. Scott, have you already spoke? Okay, we'll go ahead. Go ahead with the next item. We do have, I do see now we have two hands up. Steve needs to go. Go ahead, Steve.
I'm the owner's representative, and I was under the understanding that we could answer some of the questions that came up in this process. Am I correct? Can you hear?
I believe
They're the applicant.
Yes. May I respond to some of the issues that came up from the public?
We can leave that to the hearing officer, but I believe we were going to have the Bureau respond to, have Madeline respond to all, once we get done with this hearing item, she'll respond to sort of give a final.
No, I'm sorry, but I understood the process. What they described before is that the owner had the opportunity to come back after the public spoke. Did I misunderstand that?
Have you already spoken, sir?
Yeah, but I was also, the process was explained that I would have the opportunity to come back after the public spoke.
I understand. I will defer to the hearing officer.
Yes, we did mention that earlier, but in the order that we're going to go in, we're going to allow the department to respond to any comments first, and then
Okay.
if the department does not have any comments, then we will allow the property owner, appellant, or applicant to rebut any comments before moving on to the next item. So if does the department have any comments?
I don't have any major comments, but I just wanted to let Josh know that I'll try to get an answer for when the 8th Street trees were approved for removal. I cannot find it in the database right now, but that's because I'm unfamiliar with that portion of the project, but I'll look it up and find out for you. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll allow the property owner, appellant, or applicant to rebut any comments that were made previously.
Yeah, I just wanted to answer some of the questions. I assume everybody can hear me. Number one, all of the trees are there. We're a strong player with the city of San Francisco. We're not going to remove trees until we are approved. So all of the trees are there. We are doing a one-to-one replacement for all trees. We utilize the buff formula of one tree for every 20 feet. And we are, I think, 7 trees short of that, but we're short of that because of the buff rules relative to light poles and so forth, and we will be paying the in lieu fee. We can't really do a new plan to lay out the trees because we have a BART tunnel and a BART station below. And so we really cannot do any new excavation above the BART station. You all may know that there was a Better Market Street plan that we worked very closely with them for years. They have determined that they're not going to do any work in the sidewalk. Their plan was to remove all 13 trees, and they were going to be able, based on their plan, to put back in 2 or 4 trees. So we're far ahead of what BMS was going to do. The public park is closed now due to COVID. It is always open, but it's closed right now during the COVID thing. We worked with the city to get permission to that. As soon as we can have permission to open it back up, we will. We put in all through the entire site. We've worked closely with Buff, and we've maximized the amount of trees that we can place on all of the streets according to the Buff formula and the Buff requirements. And we've paid in lieu fees when we were not able to meet the 1 tree per 20. We want to put in the largest stature trees that we can on Market Street. We're limited by the size of the well and the fact that the BART station is down below, but we will put in the largest trees that we possibly can. And again, and then there was one gentleman that said we removed a lot of amenities. Actually, we are replacing those amenities that we removed, such as the restaurant, with things far more better and spectacular than we ever had. One of which is we are opening a new Whole Foods grocery store and restaurant that's going to occupy about 65,000 square feet. So for those of you in the neighborhood, you will see much, plus we have many more retail spaces that we are going to lease. So we will have far more amenities than we ever had in the past. Thank you so much for allowing us to participate in the hearing, and we look forward to a favorable recommendation.
Thank you. If there are no more comments regarding this item from anybody who has not already spoken, I will now close the item and will make my recommendations to the director. The last item on today's agenda is order number 204366 at 702 Forster Street. May I have the department make their presentation?
Yes, can you all see the presentation? I'm cycling. Okay, great. Just sorry, let me go through. Oh gosh. Okay, hang on just one moment. Oh, there we go. Apologies. Just going way too fast. So we're going with 702 Forster Street. It's considered removal of 1 street tree with replacement adjacent to 702 Forester Street. However, the replacement will likely go on the Melrose Avenue frontage of the property because there's a lot more space there, and I do not believe that there's enough space on the Forster side of the property. This is very similar to another case we had a while ago where the tree appears to be on private property because it's on the property side. However, it is considered a street tree because it falls within the public right of way. So the public right of way, I believe, goes all the way up to the property line. So all the way up to the building frontage, sorry. So it is a street tree designated. So that's why we have that on there. So we approved the removal of this tree based on several factors. One of them being that is extreme close proximity to the base of the building, and also that the trunk is now affecting the actual structure. So it's pressed up against the roof and very likely to cause damage in the future. This is a redwood tree. It has 2 stems, but it's just 1 tree coming out of the same root mass. So you all probably know how large redwoods can grow, how large their trunks are. So it was an obvious conflict here in terms of tree placement, unfortunately. There's also quite a few, electric lines going through here. I believe there are high voltage nearby, not directly above the tree, thankfully, but the canopy would eventually, come into conflict with that as well. And unfortunately, PG&E must prune trees away from high voltage lines. So there's just a lot of site constraints here, unfortunately, a very large tree species smashed in between a lot of conflicts. So that is the main reasoning behind our approval for removal here. Here's the base of the tree. You can see it's quite close to the base of the building. And then another factor that has come into play here, I do believe the property owners here who can probably speak more to this issue because they're a lot more familiar with it. But I do believe there is an underground creek running near or underneath the building. So I'll let the property owner explain that a little bit more, but obviously the tree has taken advantage of this, has tapped into that water source. So will only be growing a lot more vigorously, most likely because of that. And then you can see in the next couple of slides, that there is damage to the foundation. So some cracks where this water has infiltrated as well. And I believe we have some interior photos of also the cracks and the water intrusion. So there are some pretty big issues going on here. And this is just showing the public right-of-way, the measurements. It's 15 feet on the Forster Street side and then 22.5 feet on the Melrose Ave side. So there's quite a lot of space. And in this next photo, it doesn't look as if it's actually a city street, but it is considered like still the public right-of-way. So anywhere along that frontage, 22 feet out from the building is going to be a good location for a replacement. So we've got quite a lot of room. So this just shows an overhead view of the Melrose Ave area. And that is it for this case.
Thank you. And now we'll have the property owner, appellant, or applicant if they wish to speak.
I thought they might be here. I could have been wrong, unfortunately. But if you want to speak, you do have to raise your hand. So I'm not sure if everyone knows
So we
that.
do have Mr. Nolte if the property, but we want to wait for their property owner if they're here. Is that correct? Do you have someone from?
I thought we did, but I could have been mistaken.
Right.
So I don't see a hand up.
I don't see one either, but I'll just give it a quick second here. Anyone from 702 Forster, there's another hand, and it is a call in. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the person who called in. You are allowed to speak. Just unmute your phone by pressing *9. The person.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. We are the owner of 702 Forester Street.
Ma'am, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Hi. Yes, my husband John.
Hello.
And we just want to add a little more about the leak. The roots of this tree damaged our foundation, and we have currently constant leaking inside the garage. So we have to use utility pump to continuously working to pump out the water. And there are more than one spot. This one spot is really, it's like a small river inside the garage. And the crack on the wall is so obvious. It's right behind the tree. And we have a few spots. Those we have to use towel to suck up the water in a daily basis. We have to put tons of towel to suck up the water for those smaller leak. But this one leak is really annoying, really damaging the house. And that's what, because of this moisture inside the garage, also invited bugs inside the garage. And another thing is the tree trunk currently already bending the roof. So the house is now twisting. It's quite obvious. You can see if you stand on the street, you can see the house is already twisting. So currently the roof is already bending. And we just assume this tree would damage this house pretty soon. With such rainy season, lots of rain, this tree grows so fast. We're really worried this house would get damaged and cracked by the tree within a year or two. So that's it. That's what I want to add on.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Nolte, you can go ahead.
Good morning. I have a couple of issues. Looking at one slide kind of showed, or the slide of the street showed that this was, or that was a property, a corner property. And then another slide showed garbage cans, and those garbage cans, behind the garbage cans was green. So I would assume there was a plot there. As you see right there, that one. I don't know if that's on their property or not, but I see an empty plot right there. And then also you mentioned there may be a creek underneath. So I would suggest the replacement, that we should have multiple replacements when the redwood tree is taken out, multiple replacements around the property. Because it's every 20 feet, there should be a street tree. So I would assume that there would be multiple trees planted, and I would want the property owner to take on the cost and replacement, and also the watering of the tree, since they are benefiting for the removal of the tree and the integrity of their house, and also to fix up their leaking garage and whatever else is going on with their house because of the redwood tree. So saying that there's already water possibly underground that would help the trees that would be going in. And then also I see, looking at this now, I see also high voltage lines. So they would have to be smaller, at least on this side of the street of the property. Can't be too high because of the high voltage lines. So those are my comments on this slide. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nolte. And then now we have Josh. Go ahead, Josh Clip.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the homeowner.
Okay, my apologies, Josh. Josh, my apologies. I hit the wrong button. You can start all over. Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry about that. You get all your time back and then some. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's all good. I appreciate that. What I was saying is I want to thank the homeowner for her testimony, and I want to acknowledge, I think as somebody who does a lot of public speaking, I want to acknowledge the guts that it takes to do public speaking and thank her for that. I also want to acknowledge it's really incredibly sad when we lose, especially a native redwood, when we lose such a beautiful resource that has done so much for our ecosystem and for our whole community. In that vein, in case I don't get to do this at another time, I want to thank Madeline for her service to the city of San Francisco. I have known her since she was at Friends of the Urban Forest and spent many Saturday mornings with her and her team planting trees all over the city. And I was personally thrilled when I heard that she was sad when I heard she was leaving FUF, but thrilled when I heard she was going to the Bureau of Urban Forestry, because I know her to be incredibly bright and thoughtful. And I knew she would make an excellent inspector and public servant. And in all the times I've interacted with Madeline, she's been kind, compassionate, open to new ways of thinking, and always, always considerate of the public she serves, whoever that person is. And I just want to thank her for that publicly and directly, and let her know how grateful I am for her service to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
I believe we have Michael up next.
Yes. First, I'd like to thank the property owner for having to put up with such a problem with your house, and also bringing this to the attention of the city to try to fix the problem. And I know that it's hard to sometimes deal with the bureaucracy of the city, but at the same time, you as a homeowner have to look out for what's yours and make it better. I think we like to see you minimize the expense if possible, but at the same time, add as much in replacement, because the redwood is obviously giving a lot to our community, and we would like to see as much carbon assistance that it offers in the replacement, whatever the replacement will be, if it's multiple trees or one tree. But I think that since you're on the corner lot, you have the ability to provide some value when there's a new owner, or at least to your neighbors. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. That is our last order. Is there any other public comment before the hearing officer closes out? Or anyone from Buff have anything before we close out? Now would be the time.
No, I am all good.
Okay, if there are no more public comments, I am closing this hearing. This hearing is now closed.